There comes a quiet season in a person's life, marked not by birthday parties or milestones of success, but by a silent transformation from deep within. It arrives when you least expect it. It might be a peaceful morning as you sit quietly watching the streaks of sunlight stretching across the floor, no longer feeling the urge to hurry. Or perhaps it is a moment when your hands are immersed in the warm water at the sink, your eyes unintentionally drifting toward the old garden, suddenly wondering, how have so many years passed as quickly as a breeze whispering through the leaves? It is precisely in those moments of stillness that a profound realization begins to take shape. You realize that true strength no longer lies in dominance or the effort to prove yourself to the world. Strength at this time is not about power or winning and losing, but the ability to keep your mind unshakable amidst the ever-changing flow of life. But let me ask you this. Why is it that some people, despite enduring so many losses, still radiate an extraordinary sense of peace, while others falter before even the smallest fluctuations? Is it due to fate? Or is there a secret hidden in the way we face life? The Buddha taught that suffering is not a sign of a mistake, but a lesson waiting to be unfolded. Pain is inevitable, but prolonged suffering is something we can transform. This is not a call for toughness, but an invitation for you to enter the journey of rediscovering the steadfastness of a quiet mind, a place where no storm can knock you down. Lesson 1. Suffering is the teacher, not the enemy. There is a quiet truth that most of us only realize after passing more than half of our lives. Suffering is not a sign that life is going off track. On the contrary, it is exactly when the most important lessons begin to be revealed. Ever since we were children, we were often taught to avoid pain at all costs. If something caused hurt, we were advised to fix it quickly, cover it up, and keep moving as if everything were fine. This way of thinking might be effective for a certain period, but as we enter the later chapters of life, with losses accumulating over the years, we see clearly that running away has never brought true peace. In the teachings of the Buddha, this understanding is expressed exquisitely through the metaphor of the two arrows. He taught that when an unfortunate event occurs, such as a serious illness, a betrayal, or the passing of a loved one, that is the first arrow. It strikes the body and mind, causing pure pain. That is the natural part of being human. However, what leaves us exhausted is actually the second arrow. This arrow is the one we shoot at ourselves through resistance, harsh judgments, and a desperate craving for life to be something other than what it is. It is the second arrow of torment and fear that causes a wound far deeper and more painful than the initial arrow. Look at the story of Mrs. Mina, an elderly woman in a small village. When her husband passed away unexpectedly, she did not just drown in the sadness of loss, but also imprisoned herself in a dungeon of regret. She constantly blamed herself. If only I had noticed his health sooner. If only I'd been more decisive in making him see a doctor. The pain of separation was the first arrow, but the self-punishment and guilt were the second arrow that made her unable to eat or sleep. Until one day, an old monk gently told her, "My dear, the river of life will carry you, but only if you are willing to let go of the dry branches along the shore." The monk wanted to remind her that suffering is natural, but holding on to it, repeating it, and making it your identity is what imprisons your soul. In Buddhist philosophy, suffering, dukkha, is not a punishment but a path. Instead of complaining, "Why did this happen to me?" a wise person will learn to shift direction and ask, "What is this moment trying to teach me?" That small change from an attitude of opposition to a mindful curiosity is the beginning of the process of transforming pain into wisdom. Just as a block of clay must endure heavy pressure to be shaped into pottery, or steel must pass through red-hot fire to become solid, the mind of a person after 60 is the same. It does not become steady through ease, but through the courage to sit back, face, and listen to the messages that pain brings. Therefore, the next time pain knocks on your door, do not rush to view it as an illegal intruder. Invite it in, brew a cup of tea, and sit quietly with it. When you stop shooting the second arrow into yourself, you will see the pain gradually dissipate, leaving behind a priceless gift, the beginning of a steadfast mind that nothing can shake. Lesson 2. Practice stillness. When the storm hits, it is often said that a calm sea never made a skilled sailor. And this life, as we have all come to understand after many decades, has never been a tranquil lake. In our youth, we often tried to outrun the storms, building ships that were big and fast in the hope that muscular strength would carry us to a safe shore. But as the years of youth fade away, we suddenly realize that the greatest strength is not the ability to avoid the tempest, but knowing how to remain still right in the middle of it. This is when the Buddhist path gently guides the way, not to teach us how to fight the wind, but to show us how to drop the anchor for the soul. Stillness in the Buddhist tradition is not a passive state, a giving up, or an indifference toward the world. On the contrary, it is an act of great courage. The late Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh once wrote that feelings come and go like clouds in a windy sky, and conscious breathing is each person's anchor. In other words, we do not have the power to stop the wind from blowing, but we can train our minds not to be swept away by those currents. Reflect on the journey of Mr. Raymond, a man in his 70s who began seeking meditation after his partner passed away. In the early days, he confessed that he could not sit still for more than 3 minutes without tears welling up as memories flooded back. But he continued to show up, not to escape the inner storm, but to learn how to sit with it. Breath by breath, he gradually discovered that stillness was not the absence of pain, but a sacred space that allowed him to feel all his pain without being drowned by it. Over time, he no longer saw his pain as a violent wave, but as a tide rising and then falling according to the eternal law of all things. In the flow of Buddhism, practicing mindful breathing is not merely a relaxation technique. It is the door that brings us back to the present moment. When we take a deep breath in and exhale slowly, we are sending a signal that we are safe and capable of facing whatever is happening. This is the kind of inner strength that anyone can cultivate, regardless of age or circumstance. You do not need to go deep into the forest or burn incense and chant. Simply sitting quietly on the porch, closing your eyes and breathing is enough. That stillness, when nurtured in ordinary times, will instinctively arise during the most difficult moments, helping you stand firm against all the noise of the world. Lesson 3. The gentle power of discipline. There is a common misunderstanding that discipline is something harsh, cold, or restrictive. Many people often associate it with strict rules, limitations, or the dry routines of military life. However, from a Buddhist perspective, discipline is not about control but about compassion. It is not about forcing yourself to become someone else, but a gentle process of guiding yourself back to your true nature. In Pali, the word for discipline is sila, one of the pillars of the Noble Eightfold Path. Rather than being a tool of suppression, sila is the path of harmony, a way of living with consistency, mindfulness, and deep meaning. Reflect on this. In the twilight years, as the body gradually slows down and worldly worries fade, the inner world can sometimes become noisier. Thoughts wander, emotions fluctuate unexpectedly, and the structures that once came from work or family begin to dissolve. At this time, what will keep our hearts firmly anchored? The answer is discipline, but not the discipline of pressure, rather the discipline of presence. Consider the story of Helen, a retired teacher at the age of 80. Every day she begins with a simple ritual, waking up at 6:30, washing her face with cold water, lighting a candle at the kitchen table, and sitting in silence with a cup of tea for 15 minutes before speaking a single word to anyone. She does not do this out of obligation, but because it reminds her of who she truly is. That is the essence of gentle discipline, not a performance for the world to see, but being present for yourself. The Buddha never taught us to chase flashy achievements. He simply encouraged us to do small things with total attention. Waking up on time, washing dishes slowly, or speaking words that are truthful and kind. These repetitive actions performed in mindfulness will mold a wise and resilient mind. We often wait for motivation to visit before starting a task, but motivation is like the wind, coming and going without notice. In contrast, discipline is the solid ground beneath your feet. It is the steady step taken even when you are tired, even when you are unsure, or when no one is watching. The biggest secret is that when you follow through on what you have committed to yourself, a quiet self-confidence is built. This is not a loud arrogance, but a firm belief that I will not abandon myself. Therefore, if you find life feels fragmented, do not wait for clarity to find you. Create it yourself by sweeping the floor very slowly or folding clothes neatly. That is the true power of discipline. Lesson 4. Letting go of what weakens the mind. It is quite strange that as we age, we become wiser in many aspects, yet unintentionally let old habits cling to us like shadows that are hard to shake off. These habits are often not the massive or loud mistakes that we usually guard against. Instead, they are small daily patterns of thought and behavior that seem harmless but are silently draining our peace, blurring our clarity, and eroding the foundation of the mind's strength. From a Buddhist perspective, letting go is not a one-time event, but a lifelong practice. It does not mean rejecting or suppressing emotions, but recognizing what no longer serves the soul's growth, and then releasing them with kindness, without resentment or guilt. There are 3 specific habits that many of us still unknowingly carry, and each of them, if left unchecked, will eat away at our inner strength like persistent water wearing down stone. First is the habit of complaining. Of course, expressing pain or sharing disappointments is natural for humans. However, constant complaining will program the mind to focus only on the negative side of issues. It trains the brain to always look for troubles instead of opportunities. The Buddha once taught that what we frequently think about and dwell upon will become the inclination of our spirit. When we immerse ourselves in complaints, we become slaves to dissatisfaction. Letting go of complaining is not about denying pain, but about transforming energy from blaming to action, from passive despair to active awareness to ask, what can I learn from this? If the answer is that nothing more can be done, then let it go. The second habit is the excessive craving for comfort. This often creeps into life as we grow old, when we feel we have contributed enough and deserve to rest, avoiding all difficulties. But comfort that turns into avoidance becomes an easy, man-made prison. Growth only exists at the boundary beyond what we find easy. In monastics, life. Monks do not practice asceticism to torture themselves, but to keep the mind alert and sharp. They wake up early, eat simply, and walk barefoot as a way of choosing adversity as a teacher. For us, this could simply be walking a little more each day, refusing one more hour in front of the television, or bravely facing a difficult conversation that we have postponed for years. It does not need to be dramatic. It just needs to be intentional. Finally, there is the habit of making excuses, one of the most subtle barriers. Excuses often sound very much like kindness toward oneself, such as, "I am too old to change," or "That is just the way I am." However, hidden deep beneath those words is often the fear of failure, or the fear of starting over. Buddhism teaches about impermanence, that nothing stands still forever, including our personality patterns, unless we stubbornly cling to them. The truth is that every moment brings a new choice, and you are never too old or too late to begin again. Letting go is not weakness, but wisdom, the courage to shed the heavy mental baggage that has been carried for far too long. When you let go, you will feel a sense of relief, not only in your thoughts, but also in your breath and your body. It is a wide open space where your mind can truly breathe again. The act of laying down the burdens that no longer fit your current self is a way to respect the journey you have passed. Do not keep things that essentially never belong to you. Instead of trying to accumulate more, the true strength of old age sometimes comes from daring to strip away what is not truly necessary, so that you can walk serenely in the authentic freedom of the soul. Lesson 5. Transforming failure into fuel for growth. On the long journey of life, perhaps after early heartbreaks, unsatisfactory jobs, or the painful silence of a dream left unfinished, many of us begin to develop a hidden fear called failure. That pain comes not just from the fact that we fall, but from the negative meanings we attach to it. We tell ourselves that at this age we should be wiser, or that we are too old to make silly mistakes. Consequently, in an unconscious way, we begin to play it safe, stop experimenting with new things, silence our ideas, and withdraw into ourselves to avoid facing disappointment. However, Buddhist wisdom brings a gentle yet powerful truth. Failure is not the opposite of growth, but the very fertile soil for that growth to sprout and flourish. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha reminded us that just as a solid rock is not shaken by the storm, the wise are not moved by praise or blame, or by the successes and failures of the world. This means that both success and failure are impermanent phenomena. They come and go like clouds passing through the sky without being able to define the true nature of that sky. What truly matters is the quiet space of the mind behind every fluctuation. Let us listen to the story of Mr. Luis, a retired mechanic in New Mexico. After leaving his machines behind, he felt lost, and his hands, once accustomed to grease, began to urge him to do something unprecedented: learn to paint. He had never held a brush, never attended an art class. His first paintings looked very clumsy. Neighbors teased him, and the critical voice inside him screamed louder than ever. But instead of giving up, Luis completely changed his perspective. He shared that every time a stroke went astray, he would tell himself, "Good. That means I am learning." In that way, he turned every mistake into a valuable step of practice. The shift from fear to curiosity is one of the greatest transformative gifts of mindfulness. Instead of worrying about how we might fail, let us ask ourselves what we can learn from this experience. The truth is that no one has ever healed, grown strong, or discovered meaningful things without going through countless falls. Even the Buddha, before attaining enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, faced doubts, exhaustion, and endless temptations. He did not view those moments as distractions, but as an essential part of the path. For those of us in the twilight of life, we often feel our opportunities are few and our mistakes seem heavier. But that is not the case. This is actually the most sacred time to be compassionate with failures, because now we are mature enough to understand that failure does not define us. Next time, when you hesitate to start something new, gently respond to the fearful voice within. If I fall, I will grow. Remember that the soil must be plowed for the seed to take root, and every step, even the missteps, is part of the brilliant blossoming of a life that is still, vibrating with vitality. Lesson 6. Strength is quiet. In a world that frequently confuses noise with power, it is very easy for us to overlook the kind of strength that whispers instead of roars. But as we grow older, we begin to realize that true strength does not need to be ostentatious to be real. It does not enter a room with thunderous footsteps, nor does it try to speak over the voices of others. It simply exists like a deep ocean current beneath still waters. The image of a candle in a closed room is a wonderful symbol of internal power according to Buddhist thought. That candle does not need attention. It does not compete with the darkness. It simply shines in a steadfast and persistent way. That is the essence of the inner strength we have always searched for. Perhaps you have met people like this, elders who do not say much, but when they speak, everyone around them listens. They are the ones who walk into the eye of the storm without carrying weapons, only with a calm heart. Their strength is not to impose, but to act as an anchor, keeping the soul intact before the storms of life. Take, for example, the story of Tenzin, a nun who experienced horrific traumas during her exile. She lost her home, her community, and many loved ones. She had every reason to become angry, bitter, and vengeful. However, when asked what her greatest fear was during that time, she replied, "I was afraid I would lose my compassion." To be able to maintain love in the face of such suffering and injustice requires a kind of strength greater than any sharp sword. In Buddhist teachings, this is called the power of equanimity, a spacious mind that is not disturbed by praise or blame, gain or loss, joy or sorrow. It is not because the person no longer has emotions, but because they have learned how not to cling to them. They understand that emotions are just waves that rise and then vanish, but the mind can remain vast and quiet, like the depths of the great ocean. Many of us were once taught that expressing emotion is weakness, or that staying calm in the face of cruelty is being submissive. But the truth is, the strongest person is often the one who chooses not to join the battle, not out of fear, but out of insight. The Buddha taught that hatred never ends through hatred. Only love can resolve it. Therefore, if you find yourself in a situation where you are criticized or misunderstood, pause and ask yourself what strength would look like if it did not need to prove right or wrong. Sometimes that strength is simply silence, a gentle word, or simply walking away with your dignity intact. You do not need to win every argument. You only need to maintain your own equanimity. True power does not lie in controlling others, but in letting go of the need for control, so that every passing day is a choice of peace. Lesson 7. Discipline over motivation. We have all experienced those mornings, especially as we age, when getting out of bed feels like lifting an entire mountain. There are the aches in the knees, a heaviness in the chest, or simply a small voice whispering in your ear, "What is the point of doing this today?" Yet there are other days when we wake up with boundless energy, a clear mind, and full of inspiration to carry out every plan. The truth is that motivation is like a passing guest, coming and going as it pleases. Meanwhile, discipline is a loyal companion, one who will walk with you whether the sky outside is clear blue or filled with storms. Many people wait for motivation to knock on the door before taking action, but according to Buddhist wisdom, all emotions are impermanent. If we anchor our lives to the ups and downs of our moods, we will forever be swept away by the tides of uncertainty. Instead of waiting for inspiration, Buddhism invites us to practice right effort, a crucial step in the Noble Eightfold Path. Right effort is not about exhausting your strength or forcing things to happen according to your will, but about returning to the present moment with persistence and gentleness. It is about showing up with devotion, time and time again, even when inspiration seems 10,000 miles away. Let us listen to the story of Susan, a 72-year-old widow who always cherished the dream of writing a memoir, but often felt too tired and lacked self-confidence. One day, she decided to make a small change. She would write exactly one paragraph every morning after her tea, regardless of how she felt. Whether it rained or shone, whether she was happy or sad, and even when joint pain made it difficult to type, Susan kept her promise to herself. She did not do it because she felt full of motivation, but because she had made a vow to respect her inner voice, even when it trembled. A year later, she held the completed manuscript in her hands. That achievement did not come from waiting for a muse to visit, but from a rhythm of life rooted deeply in discipline rather than desire. That is the true meaning of discipline as love made visible. It is how we care for ourselves, not just when we feel okay, but especially when we do not. Discipline is the act of sitting in meditation when the mind is agitated, of preparing a healthy meal when we just want to grab something quick, of going out for a walk or calling a friend not because we feel like it, but because we treasure the life that has been gifted to us. The Buddha himself practiced unshakable discipline through years of persistent effort, overcoming hunger, fatigue, and temptations, not to become a Superman, but to awaken his true nature. He found peace not when the world allowed it, but when his mind had been trained to see through all things. So ask yourself, what would your life become if you stopped waiting for motivation and chose to start each day with deep care? Every tiny effort, when repeated with mindfulness, becomes a path. Step by step, that is how rivers wear away mountains. In the gentle light of daily devotion, through the quiet power of persistent presence, you will discover an inner strength that does not flicker with emotion but always burns brightly with a clear purpose. That is where true transformation begins to take place. As this quiet journey draws to a close, take just one moment to feel your heart right now. Is there something that has just softened, or perhaps a seed of wisdom that has just been awakened? What we have shared together is not a list of dry rules, nor is it a map to absolute perfection. It is simply a gentle reminder that you do not need to be a fierce warrior to face life. You only need to stop running away from yourself. We have moved through the truth that suffering is not an enemy, but a teacher that helps transform pain into wisdom. We have understood that stillness is a powerful sanctuary built through every mindful breath. True strength is always humble, consistent, and deeply rooted in how we treat ourselves when no one is watching. We have also looked back at the value of letting go of invisible burdens, like the habit of complaining or the excessive need for comfort. Instead of feeling ashamed of failure, we have chosen to see it as fertile soil for growth. And finally, we realize that while motivation may come and go, it is self-discipline that builds an unchanging soul. Now I warmly invite you to make a small commitment. Sit quietly for just 5 minutes every day, not to fix anything, not to chase some lofty state, but simply to remember who you truly are behind all the noise of the world. Let go of old emotional habits that no longer fit the beautiful soul you have painstakingly nurtured for so long. The person you are today is no longer the person of the past, and that is something for us to celebrate rather than regret. You hold the key to peace, not through coercion, but through intentionality in every loving choice. Ask yourself, what am I? We have moved through the truth that suffering is not an enemy, but a teacher that helps transform pain into wisdom. We have understood that stillness is a powerful sanctuary built through every mindful breath. True strength is always humble, consistent, and deeply rooted in how we treat ourselves when no one is watching. We have also looked back at the value of letting go of invisible burdens, like the habit of complaining or the excessive need for comfort. Instead of feeling ashamed of